Good evening, folks. Tonight we're going to talk about how Michigan and Texas, Boise State and Oregon all once played each other, and the stats. Well, we're going to go by their stats here. First, we're going to have Oregon. First, let's look at how they all played. Starting with how they all each did it that year. Now, let's look at how the 2008, the first time these two teams met, Michigan and Texas met, was in the 2005 Rose Bowl. Texas won 38-37. Vince Young, number 10, was your quarterback, and number 7, Chad Henne, was your quarterback for Michigan. While Texas was Vince Young, number 10. Vince Young went 16-28 for 180 yards, 1 interception, 1 touchdown. He also carried the ball 21 times, 192 yards, 9.1 average, 4 touchdowns. 60 was the longest, 264 yards. Number 80, Bo Scafey, 4 receptions, 68 yards, 444 yards, total yards altogether. And number 14, Dusty Mangum, kicked a 37-yard field goal to seal the deal. Now for Michigan, number 7, Chad Henne, went 18-34 for 227 yards and 4 touchdowns. Number 20, Michael Hart, had 21 carries for 83 yards, 4 yards average, 12 the longest, for 125 yards. Number 1, Braylon Edwards, 10 receptions, 109 yards, 3 touchdowns, 39 the longest, 352 total yards. Number 38, Garrett Rivas, 40 kicked field goals from 44, 32, and 42. And that's pretty much all that sums up their summary. Now for Ohio State. Versus Western Michigan, you gotta go back to the Cardale Jones era, JT Barrett era. During that time frame, Cardale Jones went 19-33 for 288 yards, 1 interception, and 2 touchdowns. Number 15, Ezekiel Elliott had 16 carries, 124 yards, 1 touchdown, 26 was the longest, 7.8 yards was the average, 223 total yards. Number 3, Michael Thomas, 6 receptions, 80 yards, 1 touchdown, 38 the longest, 511 total yards that game. Then number 98, Jack Willoughby, kicked a 30-yard field goal. Now for Western Michigan, number 11, Zach Terrell, went 18-33 for 169 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Number 32, Jamari Bogan, 23 carries, 93 yards, 17 the longest, average 4 yards per carry, 169 yards. And then number 8, Daniel Braverman, 10 receptions, 123 yards, 1 touchdown, 55 longest, 338 total yards. So that tells you a lot about this thing that they dealt with. Now, when it comes to Oregon and Boise State in 2008, I might get these names kind of mixed up, so I apologize for that. The first time they met, Boise State won the first time at Oregon, 37-32. In 2009 at Boise State won again, 19-8. Then 2017, the Las Vegas Bowl, Boise State won again, 38-28. So, Oregon hasn't won anything against Boise State. So, let's look at the stats of these games. In 2008, Kellen Moore went 25-37 for 386 yards, 1 interception, and 3 touchdowns. Number 41, Ian Johnson, 19 carries, 40 yards, 2.1 average, 1 touchdown, 6 was the longest, 38 total yards. Number 9, Jeremy Childs, 5 receptions, 102 yards, equals 424 total yards. Number 35, Kyle Brotzman, 51 for 26 and 34-yard field kick. Those many yard field goals. Now for Oregon, number 1, Darren Thomas went 13 of 25 for 210 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Number 9, LeGarrette Blount, 18 carries, 99 yards, 5.5 yards on average, 18 yards the longest, and 1 touchdown, 227 yards. Now number 83, Ed Dixon, 7 receptions, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, 41 the longest, 437 total yards. That says a lot. Very close numbers altogether. Now in 2009, when Boise State won 19-8 in a very, very close competition, number 8, Jeremiah Masoli, the quarterback for Oregon, went 14 of 27 for 121 yards and 1 interception. LaMichael James, number 22, 2 carries, 22 yards, 17 longest, 11 yards average, 31 total rushing yards. Then Jeff Mahale, number 23, 5 receptions, 45 yards, 14 the longest, 142 total yards. Now Boise State, Kellen Moore again, 19 of 29 for 197 yards, 1 touchdown. Number 34, DJ Harper, 19 carries, 88 yards, 1 touchdown, 33 the longest, 4.6 yards average, 164 total yards. Number 87, Austin Pettis, 6 receptions, 68 yards, 1 touchdown, 25 the longest, 361 total yards. And then Kyle Brotzman, number 35, kicks a 45-yard field goal in that game. That just shows you how good of the team they really were at that time. Now we go to the 2017 Las Vegas Bowl. Now we will go to the 2017 Las Vegas Bowl. Boise State, 38, Oregon, 28. Number 4, Brent Rypien, R-Y-P-I-E-N. I'm not sure how that exactly is pronounced, but I was just guessing. Rypien. Went 21 of 38 for 362 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. This is all for Boise State, this part is. Number 21, Ryan Walpin. Had 23 carries, 2 touchdowns, 71 yards, 3.1 average for 114 total yards and rushing. And Cedric Wilson, 10 receptions, 221 yards, 1 touchdown, 22.1 yards average for 477 total yards. And number 96, Hayden Hogarth, had a 39-yard field goal attempt. So that there tells you how good of a team this really was at that time. I mean, that just shows you how good they really were. Now we got Oregon. Number 10, Justin Herbert. 26 of 36, 233 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Then Herbert again, 9 carries, 17 yards, 1.9 yards average. The number 13, Dylan Mitchell, 9 receptions, 143 yards, 15.9 yards average. That was then. Now, Oregon gone. Let's look at how each of these teams do in the regular season, at least in the bowl games. We'll first start with that team up north in Texas. Texas, they ended up winning their first game at home against North Texas. They destroy them 65-0. Then they travel to Arkansas and come away with, they squeak out a victory 22-20. Then they go back home to take on Rice, winning 35-13. Then they're home against Baylor, winning 44-14. Then they continue their home streak, but come up short against Oklahoma, 12-0. Then they beat out Missouri, 28-20. Then they take on Texas. Then they travel a 2-game road trip, taking on Texas Tech, winning 51-21. Then they beat the pants off of Colorado 31-7. Then they're home against Oklahoma State, beating them to hell and back, winning 56-35. Then they go on the road to Kansas and almost lose. They were that close to losing, but at the end, Texas comes away with the W, winning 27-23. Then Texas comes away with a victory at home against Texas A&M, 26-13. And then, now it's Michigan's turn. That team up north took on Miami of Ohio at home, trouncing them 43-10. But then, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish come away with the luck of the Irish at home against that team up north, as Michigan traveled there and got what was coming to them, as Notre Dame won 28-20. Then Michigan was home again against San Diego State, winning 24-21. Then they stayed home with Iowa, winning 30-17 against the pesky Iowa team. Then they traveled to Indiana and demolished Indiana, 35-14. And then they were home against Minnesota and sneaked past Minnesota, number 13 Minnesota, 27-24. Then they traveled to Illinois, beating Illinois 30-19. And then they beat number 12 Purdue 16-14. And then they were home against Michigan State, and it took 3 overtimes to win, 45-37. Then they were home against Northwestern and won 42-20. But then they traveled to Ohio State and lost 37-20 as the Buckeyes dropped nuts on their heads. 37-21. But then the Rose Bowl, Texas took care of them there, 38-37. Now we got Oregon and Boise State during that season. We'll first start with Boise State. Boise State beats out Troy 24-13. But then, very similar, this was at home. Then they traveled to Washington State, number 20 Washington State, and once again, it took 3 overtimes for to come away with the winner, as Washington State wins 47-44. Then they're home against New Mexico. Boise State wins 28-14. Then they're home again, this time against Virginia, and Virginia manhandles Boise State 42-23. And then Boise State travels to BYU, getting really pantsy, and destroys BYU 24-7. Then they take on San Diego State on the road, number 19 San Diego State on the road, 31-14. Then they're home against Wyoming, winning 24-14. Then they're on the road with Wyoming State, winning 41-14. And then they're home against Nevada with the same score, 41-14. Then they travel to Colorado State and win in overtime, 59-52. And then they're home against number 25 Air Force and pull off the victory, 44-25. And then they take on Fresno State away, falling 23 to number 23 Fresno State, 28-20-17. But then they get there, then the Mountain West Championship, Boise State gets the revenge on number 23 Fresno State, but then they dropped a couple rankings to 25 and beat Fresno State 17-14. Then that's where the Las Vegas Bowl comes around. And Boise State beats Oregon 38-28. Now let's look at Oregon's record. They take on Southern Utah and just demolish them 77-21. 2-game home streak. Then they take on Nebraska, a current Big Ten team, and win 42-35. Then they travel to Wyoming and smother Wyoming 49-13. And then they're home. Then they're at Arizona State, and fall short 37-35. And then Oregon comes away with at home with a big time victory over California. 45-24. Then they fall flat at home against Washington, number 11, Washington State, 33-10. And then they get demolished by number 23, Stanford, 49-7. And the losing streak continues on the road for their second road game with UCLA, 31-14. But then they rebound at home against Utah, winning 41-20. Then they're back on the road with Washington and fall 38-3. Washington was number 12. Then they're back home with Arizona, winning 48-28. Then they destroy Oregon State 69-10. Then the Las Vegas Bowl occurs, and that's how Oregon falls to Boise State 38-28. And those are your stats. Now, Quinn Ewers pretty much has a bone to pick with them. He spoke like a Buckeye in an interview the other day. I never would have guessed he was a Texas man. I would have guessed he was an Ohio State man. But, because the language he was speaking. He was speaking like a true Buckeye. Even though he was wearing orange. But he was wearing orange in the background. But he's a Buckeye. But he's a Longhorn right now. And he will forever be, but he is technically a Longhorn. But that's where he wanted to be this whole time, so that I'll give it to him. But this will be the one time I'll always be a Quinn Ewers fan. Quinn Ewers Texas will be his home. And he deserves every bit of it because he played at least 2 snaps at Ohio State and earned it. Well, we all know how Quinn Ewers has played at Texas. He's pretty much averaged a decent amount of yardage. Well, I got some more things I got to take care of. With that being said, hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications. With that being said, I'm out of here. Peace.